Shortly after midnight on October 24, 1995, a 911 call summoned the Johnson County, Kansas Fire Department to a luxury home burning out of control. The owner, Dr. Deborah Green, and her 10-year-old daughter Kate had escaped the fire. But 13-year-old Tim and 6-year-old Kelly were still trapped inside. Firefighters' first priority was to rescue the children. But this would be a difficult fire to penetrate. Flames engulfed nearly half the home, burning through the roof and out the windows of the second floor. The only way to get in was through the basement. Thick smoke met them as they attempted to climb to the first floor. Not far into their search of the basement rooms, the floors above started falling. If they stayed much longer, they too would be consumed. Captain Maurice Mott had no choice but to pull his men out.
We had fire coming through the roof and several of the windows throughout the first and second floor of the residence. We were concerned of complete structure collapse.
Mott and his crew conceded that the children could not be alive. To spare Green and her daughter the trauma of watching the deadly fire, investigators brought them to the Prairie Village police station. Green told police that shortly after midnight, she went to sleep in the master bedroom on the first floor. An alarm woke her. She opened her bedroom door to find the hallway consumed by smoke and fire. She said she closed the door and exited onto the deck. She heard her son calling for help through the intercom, but couldn't reach him.
All of a sudden, the smoke alarm.
Green told him to stay in his room and wait for help.
Heard the smoke alarm going off.
Like her mother, Kate had awakened to the fire alarm. Seeing thick black smoke coming from the hallway, she escaped through her bedroom window. She crawled onto the garage roof and jumped to safety. Her brother and sister never made it out of their beds. At 5 a.m., after the fire was extinguished, firefighters recovered the bodies of Kelly and Tim. Their remains were sent for autopsy.
I want to get some pictures first.
The medical examiner determined that both had died from carbon monoxide poisoning due to smoke inhalation. The fire that had taken their lives had been very hot and fast-moving. Within an hour of ignition, it had consumed much of the roof and reduced the inside to a charred skeleton.
The reason we call the task force,
The size of the home, the high degree of damage, and the double fatalities were beyond the scope of the city's resources.
The basement area is relatively clear.
Prairie Village authorities activated a task force of law enforcement, fire, and investigative officials from counties in Kansas and Missouri. Cause and origin investigators examined the burned-out home. Gary Lamons, division chief of Johnson County, realized this wouldn't be an easy fire to pinpoint.
As they went through, the whole area had to be excavated and layered through. All the debris that was on the floor had to be sifted through, and as you go through that, it's taken to the outside.
Looking through the debris, investigators found that unlike most fires, many rooms of this house seemed to have burst into flames at the same time. And unlike most fires, this one didn't burn up and out. patterns on the standing walls told investigators that it climbed straight up, very rapidly. They examined and photographed every room of the 6,000 square foot home. Forensic chemist Bill Chapin knew that this was no ordinary house fire.
You had a massive burning in the kitchen, and then not so much burning in the eating portion of the kitchen, and then massive burning in the living room, and no burning in the master bedroom, and massive burning in portions of other parts of the house. It was a hodgepodge of nonsense that you just wouldn't see in a normal, typical fire.
Such disparities made sense only if these heavily damaged areas had been doused with accelerant. The amount of damage and odd flow of the fire suggested arson. But first, the task force needed to rule out accidental causes. The gas lines were in working order. Electrical engineers determined that none of the wiring had shorted. As they excavated the rubble, investigators noticed deep pitting and scaly damage called alligatoring. It proved that they were looking at pore patterns made by a liquid accelerant. It wouldn't take much digging to turn up the source of the fire. Whoever set it had not hidden the fuel. Bottles of antifreeze, charcoal lighter fluid, and alcohol were found throughout the house. "48 samples were collected. They were sent to the lab and tested. In numerous carpet swatches, investigators found trace amounts of charcoal lighter fluid. If antifreeze and alcohol had also been used, they probably would have burned off. The presence of accelerant now proved arson. Because of the family's affluence, detectives wondered if the fire had been set to cover up a burglary. But there was no forced entry. The burglar alarm was in working order. The bolts were all in the locked position. The only damage to doors and windows had been caused by firefighters. Whoever set the deadly fire had been inside the house or had a key. Investigators determined that arson had destroyed Dr. Deborah Green's home and killed 2 of her children. Now they had to determine who set the deadly blaze. While the task force continued excavating the house, detectives investigated its former occupants. Police again questioned Deborah Green. Together for 18 years, Green and her husband Mike Farrar had both been successful physicians.
Can I go to Bill's house? I'll be home by 6. I'll see you later.
After the birth of their 3rd child, she gave up her practice to be a full-time mother.
Have fun.
Bye.
Over the years, the marriage grew unhappy. 3 months before the fire, Farrar said he wanted a divorce and admitted he'd been having an affair. The family began to crumble. Green told police that shortly before going to bed on the night of the fire, she and her estranged husband had fought on the phone.
I appreciate you coming down here. Just have
Police brought Farrar into the station for further questioning.
Coffee would be nice, thank you. Can we get some coffee, please? Sure. I just have a couple questions for you. Can you give me a little bit more detail on what happened?
He told them that on the night of the fire, he had been with his children.
All right.
He dropped them off at the house, then returned to his apartment.
Night. All right.
Telephone records confirmed that Farrar had been at his apartment shortly before midnight. but his actions after that point could not be accounted for.
I shouted back, she shouted
He
back,
quickly
and it
pointed the
just
finger
continued
at
to
Green,
escalate. She liked to
claiming
take
that
the
she was
bed with her.
mentally
I was
unstable
hoping that she'd
and was
get-
capable of
she'd get
starting
to
the
sleep,
fire.
or should I bring it over?
Are there any
Police were
threats
skeptical.
during the conversation?
His anger with Deborah Green gave him the motive. His house key gave him the means. But Deborah had equal motive and equal means. Did Mike Farrar sneak in and set fire to the house? Or did Deborah set it to frame her husband and play the victim? Only the evidence left at the scene could determine the truth. As they continued excavating, investigators uncovered a trail of core patterns that wound through the house and ended at the threshold of Deborah Green's bedroom. Deborah had said that her door was closed during the fire. She said she ran out the back door when she saw the smoke. But investigators had found traces of lighter fluid in her bedroom carpet. Forensic chemist Bill Chapin felt the evidence told a different story.
You could see that accelerant pattern coming through the hallway and into the doorway area. That accelerant had soaked, if you will, up into the carpet underneath where that door was standing open.
Fire dissipation. Call
Not
fire
only
department.
did the
So I
accelerant
went
trail
there,
lead
called
into
the
her
fire
bedroom,
department, and,
the burn pattern on the
got back
carpet
as soon
could
as
not
I
have been
could.
created with the door
And
closed.
what happened when you got back? Were
Well,
there any
the
children
whole-
out?
The clues at the doorway suggested Deborah's guilt, but the case was by no means open and shut. The team needed more evidence to determine which spouse was responsible for the fire that killed their children.